James Mullaney is an astronomy writer, lecturer, and consultant who has published more than 500 articles and 3 books on observing the wonders of the heavens and logged over 20,000 hours of stargazing time with the unaided eye, binoculars, and telescopes. Formerly curator of the Buell Planetarium and Institute of Popular Science in Pittsburgh, and more recently director of the DuPont Planetarium, he served as staff astronomer at the University of Pittsburgh's Allegheny Observatory and as an editor for both Sky and Telescope and Astronomy magazines. One of the contributors to Carl Sagan's award-winning Cosmos PBS television series. His work has received recognition by such notables as Johnny Carson, Arthur Clarke, Ray Bradbury, Dr. Werner von Braun, and former student, NASA scientist, astronaut Dr. Joe Apt. His 40-year mission as a celestial evangelist has been to celebrate the universe, to get others to look up at the majesty of the heavens and think about who created it all and who keeps it all going. It's estimated that more than 1 million people of all ages, faiths, and backgrounds have heard his inspiring message. And now, The Heavens Declare by astronomer Dr. James Mullaney.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our program, The Heavens Declare, here at this beautiful retreat facility. My name is Jim Mullaney. I'm an astronomer, both an amateur and a professional. I had my first look at the stars at the age of 8 when an uncle gave me a look at actually the moon and the satellites of Jupiter through a small telescope, and from that point on, I knew I was hooked. Professionally, I've done research, both astrometric and spectroscopic research in astronomy with some of the world's largest telescopes. I've taught astronomy at a number of colleges and universities over the year, and I've also been director of 2 major planetariums. More recently, I am what people have labeled me as a celestial evangelist. And my mission, actually going back as far as 40 years now, has been to get others to look up at the majesty of the heavens and think about who created all of this and who keeps it all going. And as we're going to see in our journey today, we are going to see evidence of a creator who not only made this incredible universe we live in, but created us as well. In our journey, we're going to travel here from planet Earth, and at the end of the program, we're going to be some 15 billion light years out at the edge of the observable universe. A light year, as I'm sure many of you know, is the distance that a beam of light traveling at 186,000 miles per second, that's about 7 times around the Earth in a single second, will travel in the course of a year. That works out to be about 6 trillion miles. It's the number 6 with 12 zeros after it. As with so many of the other things we'll be discussing in our program today, this totally boggles the mind. You know, we can walk a few miles, we can drive a few hundred, we can fly a few thousand, but when you get into thousands, millions, and billions, and even trillions of miles, the human mind just can't grasp it. Throughout the program, I'm going to be using everyday examples, for example, sand grains and flies and other things so that we can get a better handle on the immensity of this incredible universe that we live in. And let's start doing that right here. That number 6 trillion, as I said, we cannot relate to that. But when you get an opportunity, maybe this will bring it home to you, go sit in your favorite easy chair and then start counting the number of miles in a light year at the rate of 1 a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. It turns out that to count up to that number, 6 trillion, would take you 180,000 years. Years. And there is no star within a light year except our own sun. We're going to be 6 trillion times 15 billion miles out at the edge of the observable universe at the end of this program. And we're going to see overwhelming evidence of a creator, a designer behind this magnificent universe. You know, folks, there are many ways of worshiping our Creator, our God. One, of course, is in chapel, in church, in synagogue, in a temple. These are formal and certainly appropriate ways. But there are other ways of getting close to God, and one of these is by studying His handiwork in nature. And we don't have to look very far to find some great examples of this. I think most of you have heard of St. Francis, the founder of the Franciscan order, and you may be aware that he literally talked to the animals and the birds. He was seen to go out and hug trees, and he felt one way to get closer to God was by studying His handiwork in nature. Many of you may have heard of the great astronomer Johannes Kepler from the 1600s. He's the great genius that figured out or actually discovered the 3 laws that govern how the planets circle the sun, including the one we're all riding on. And when he made this incredible breakthrough, he was heard to scream out with joy. He said, "Oh God, I'm thinking thy thoughts after thee." In other words, he realized in discovering these 3 incredible laws of the universe that he was tapping into the mind of God from which all of this came. My all-time favorite is Abraham Lincoln. And perhaps you didn't know this, but Abe Lincoln was a stargazer like myself and over 1 million other Americans. Well, Abraham Lincoln is quoted as saying that when he looked up at the stars at night, he felt he was looking directly into the face of God. I certainly feel that way, and perhaps many of you have when you've looked up on a crystal clear night. Before we begin our cosmic journey, there's a couple things I would like to share with you. First of all, there's a perception on the part of most people that live on this planet that yes, it's incredible what's going on out there in the universe and all the amazing new discoveries, but it really has nothing to do with our everyday life. Well, folks, nothing could be further from the truth. As I'm about to show you, that our very lives depend on what happens in the sky. Now, to begin with, hopefully you've at least sometime today had a good meal. And guess where the energy in the food that's in your stomach right now digesting, guess where that energy came from? It came from the sun. And the sun is a star. Now, you've perhaps heard that all the way back into grade school. But we're going to show you today in our program what it means to be a star in a way I don't think you've ever experienced. If you drove here to our program today, and I'm sure you all did, guess what the gasoline in your gas tank is? It's liquefied sunlight. If you trace back where the energy and the carbon bonds and the gasoline came from, that also came from the sun. If you heat, or depending on the season, cool your home with natural gas, fuel oil, or electricity generated by coal, guess what you're using? You're using sunlight. So our Creator, in His infinite wisdom, put us at just the right distance around the perfect size and temperature star to keep us alive. Well, let's take this a step further. I'm sure you would all agree that rain is essential to life on this planet. We're basically water creatures, and if it were not for rain, obviously there would be no life on planet Earth. I'm sure also that you've heard of shooting stars, and perhaps many of you do realize that real stars out there in the sky do not come shooting into the Earth's atmosphere. We'd be instantly vaporized. These things are millions of miles across. But it is true that there is a lot of debris out in space, and I have a piece of one here in my hand, left over from the birth of the planets. Astronomers don't call these shooting stars. We call them a term I know you've heard before, meteors. In fact, once they hit the ground and we can pick them up, we call them meteorites. By the way, this is a little guy. There are meteorites in museums that weigh up to 65 tons, as big as a house. And we now know that that's what wiped out the dinosaurs and other mass extinctions throughout history. And there are chunks of iron and stone and nickel, and I happen to have a piece of charred glass in my hand. Well, if it were not for these shooting stars, as they're called, entering the Earth's atmosphere day and night, they hit the atmosphere at 40, 50 miles a second and burn up. Most of them burn up. Pieces of them do reach the ground, but mostly they burn up, and there is dust filtering down through the air day and night. Guess what? It would never, ever rain or snow on the planet Earth. Every single raindrop and every snowflake, if you look at it under a microscope, nucleates or forms around a speck of stardust. So not only did our Creator put us around a perfect star to feed us and give us energy and keep us alive, He put something so ethereal as shooting stars in our atmosphere so that we would have rain and water and life on this planet. So indeed, our very existence depends on what happens up there in the sky. Also, I'm very much into show and tell, as some of you know that have heard my program before. I have here in my hand a little container of sand. And perhaps from where you're sitting, you may be able to see it's not even filled entirely to the top. Now, in this container are 250,000 individual grains of sand. There's 250,000 pieces of sand in here. And what does this have to do with our subject today? In a few minutes, when we get into the slides, I'm going to tell you something about stars and sand grains that'll forever change how you walk on a beach or look up at the sky at night. Also, I'd like to take a few moments to see if I can convert some of you into becoming stargazers, like myself again, Abraham Lincoln, and many, many other people throughout the world. And you see, astronomy, unlike many subjects, scientific subjects such as nuclear physics, I don't know anybody that has a cyclotron in their basement, but astronomy is a participatory subject. Using just the eyes God gave us, you can personally tap in and witness one-on-one much of the majesty we're going to see in our program today. And in any field, you need a basic reference to get started. And the greatest little book ever written, bar none, on stargazing, and a very simple title, very easy to remember, it's called Stars. It's been out for over 50 years. This is one of those little golden guides to nature. There's about 30 titles, birds, fish, flowers, butterflies, and so on. And I don't know if you folks have ever had the opportunity to see a golden guide, but they are beautifully illustrated. Every picture is an education, and throughout the book are star charts to help key you in on various parts of the sky and show you the wonders that you can see on a clear night. So this little book, if you get interested in what we're talking about today, go to your nearest bookstore, and this will become literally your passport to the stars. There's one problem, of course, with any book that is written, and that is that it cannot keep up to the latest discoveries in a field. And I'm holding in my hands here the world's two leading magazines on astronomy and stargazing, Sky and Telescope and Astronomy Magazine. I've served as an editor with both of these magazines, so I have no preference except to say that astronomy is probably more suited for the novice stargazer. These are available in any library and on the newsstands at most bookstores, and also, of course, by subscription. And in addition to all the latest discoveries which are reported monthly, they contain beautiful monthly star charts to key you into the heavens, and they also have special charts to show you where the moon and the planets are going to be during that month. So in addition to the little book Stars, I would suggest you go to your library or your bookstore and pick up a copy, preferably here, of Astronomy Magazine. Now, let's take this a step further. I'm not sure why this never seems to occur to most people, but I'm sure at home, or perhaps you've even brought a pair with you here to the retreat center this weekend, you have a pair of binoculars or sports glasses, or what I'm holding in my hand, a simple opera or theater glass. And you would not believe what something this small is capable of showing you in the heavens. This little glass, which magnifies only 4 times, makes things 4 times bigger than the human eye sees, is capable of showing you the craters and mountains and valleys on our moon, the 4 bright satellites of Jupiter, all of the planets except Pluto, asteroids and comets, and literally thousands of double and multiple and pulsating and exploding stars, star clusters, nebulas, galaxies, the Milky Way, satellites, on and on and on. So if you have a pair of binoculars already and get the little book Stars, you can be cruising the universe every clear night of your life. I must warn you about something. Stargazing is more addictive than drugs and alcohol. You see, what happens is you start looking at the stars with your eyes and then with a pair of binoculars, and the next logical step is you're going to want to see more, so you go out and buy a small telescope such as we have here. And the views through something even this small are so incredible that you want to get a bigger telescope so you can see more, and then a bigger telescope, and then the next thing you know, you're going to be cutting a hole in the roof of your house and putting an observatory dome over it. So be forewarned. And now, with those words of introduction, we're going to begin our incredible cosmic journey. Here is our title slide, The Heavens Declare. And I'm sure you all know where this came from, the 19th Psalm of the Bible, which tells us that the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork, and indeed the stars do. Well, one of the things I wanted to suggest to you is, if you get smitten by the stargazing bug during this program, is that you go visit an observatory such as we see here, or a planetarium, or better yet, both. Every town and city has at least one of these, and most of these facilities are open typically once a month, some even once a week. They have free public viewing nights. On those nights, you can go in to one of these domes and look through something like this. Now, let me tell you, this is a small telescope by today's standards, but one look through something like this will knock your socks off. But you don't need a big celestial cannon in your backyard to enjoy the stars, These are some of my telescopes. Even a small telescope of good quality is like an open window on the universe. This one is capable of showing you something around the size of a football field on the moon, 250,000 miles away. And you don't even need a backyard. This is a third-story balcony, and these are two more of my telescopes. Now, folks, I've already warned you that stargazing is addictive. I must also take a moment to warn you that it's somewhat dangerous. You see, if you're peeking through a telescope hanging off your third-story balcony at 3 o'clock in the morning, or if you're out in the middle of the street trying to find Saturn late at night, when the police arrive, and they will come, you better have something in the telescope to show them. But you don't have to have a telescope to enjoy the majesty of God's universe. Just using your eyes, you can see spectacles like this. This is the famous comet Hale-Bopp. Perhaps many of you did have an opportunity to see this wonderful sight. By the way, Dr. Hale is a professional astronomer. Bopp is a rank amateur who had never seen a comet in his life. Within 20 minutes, independently of each other, they discovered this object when it was still a year from the sun. And if you find a comet, it is named after you. So here's a chance to achieve some fame while you're still here on the earthly plane. Well, now that Comet Hale-Bopp has come and gone, we've been able to assess what an incredible object this was. And guess when the last time anything remotely like this graced the skies here on planet Earth? It was just prior to the birth of Christ. So Christians in particular are pointing to this comet as perhaps a prophetic sign of something important about to unfold. Here is another thing you can see with no optical aid. This streak is a satellite crossing the backdrop of the summer Milky Way. There are currently over 7,000 man-made objects in orbit, and several dozen of these you can easily see with the unaided eye. And it's not unusual after sunset or before dawn, those are the best times, to see 3, 4, 5, I've even seen 6 satellites crisscrossing the sky at the same time. This includes the Russian Mir space station, and even the space shuttle is visible when it's above the horizon. Now, here's another sight that we used to see quite frequently. This is called the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. The older folks who are in the audience will certainly remember having seen this, but I'm sure most of the younger ones have never had that opportunity. And the reason is the increasing menace of what we call light pollution. More and more shopping centers and car lots shooting light up into the sky where it doesn't belong, and we are losing our heritage of the night sky. But still, at the shore and in the mountains and other dark areas, it's possible to see what many consider nature's grandest light show. Now, this is an observation you can easily make, and maybe you've already done so. This is 3 views of the setting sun at different times of the year. You could also use the rising sun. And as you notice, the sun sets or rises at different points around the horizon throughout the year. Now, it's not the sun that is moving. It is the planet we're living on. This next picture, remarkable photograph, which I call the star tunnel, was made by pointing a camera right here at this star. That's the North Star, or Polaris, and leaving it open for a 1-hour time exposure. During the hours, you can see the stars left colored trails on the film. Now, here's a simple observation that you can make as a budding stargazer. Go outside the next clear night, look up, find some bright object. You don't even have to know what you're looking at. It could be a star, a planet. You could even use the moon. And line that star up with a telephone pole, a tree branch, or a fence post. And stand there for about a minute, and something incredible will happen. The star will go behind the telephone pole. And suddenly, the brain makes the connection, wait a minute, it's not the star that's moving, it's the planet I'm standing on. And indeed, we are living on a moving spaceship, Spaceship Earth, as Buckminster Fuller called it. This is a view of our beautiful planet taken by the Apollo astronauts. Here's the west coast of California right here. Now, everyone knows that the Earth is moving, but most folks have no clue how fast or how many ways. We all know that the Earth is spinning because that makes the sun rise and set, and the stars also. Here at the latitude of this retreat facility, we're moving faster than a supersonic jet from west to east as the Earth spins. But that's nothing because, as you all know, The Earth is circling the sun. It takes a year to make that journey. And as you sit here in your seats today, we are moving 66,000 miles an hour. But that's nothing, because the sun is taking the Earth and all the other planets in our solar system on a journey around our vast Milky Way galaxy. And as you sit here right now, we are moving over 500,000 miles an hour, and the galaxy itself is moving at some incredible but unknown speed to an unknown destination. Unknown to us, certainly known to our Creator. So folks, we are all space travelers. We're all astronauts. We've been in space all our lives. Now, this is the nearest body to us in space, the moon. And as we've already pointed out, even a pair of binoculars will show you the rugged surface of our satellite, the craters and mountains and valleys. And here, right at the outset of our journey, we come smack up against two things that I'm sure everybody in this room is interested in: life in space and spirituality. And to illustrate this, I'm going to share with you two of the incredible experiences our Apollo astronauts had orbiting the moon and on the moon's surface. This is a view of the backside of the moon, the part you cannot see from the Earth, taken through the window. Here's the bottom of the window of the Apollo 8 spacecraft. Now, folks, jog your memories. Apollo 8 was the first trip to the moon. It was not the first landing. That was Apollo 11. They never intended to land. They simply wanted to find out, can we reach the moon before we attempt to land on it? They went out and did a figure 8, went behind the moon, and then came back to the Earth. When these photographs were taken, they were out of touch with the Earth for about 40 minutes. That was expected. The radio waves wouldn't go through the bulk of the moon. And when they came out from behind the moon and could finally talk to the Earth again, all of humanity is sitting on the edge of its seats in front of television sets, waiting to find out, did these guys make it? Did they miss the moon? Are they marooned in orbit? Guess what the first words were out of the commander, Frank Borman's mouth. He said, this is a direct quote, and it came over all of the network coverage: "Houston, there is a Santa Claus." They cut him right off the air. "Houston, there is a Santa Claus." From what we've been able to gather, and several of my former students are astronauts, that apparently was a code set up to indicate that they verified the presence of some structures on the backside of the moon, structures that we could never see or find until we were advanced enough to go there. If this is all true, then that means that somebody was on the moon long before the human race. Even more incredible, all of the men and women who have gone into space have come back transformed, emotionally, physically, but especially spiritually. Many of them have openly talked about feeling a presence, and some have even come right out and called it the presence of God. On no flight was it so dramatic as on Apollo 12, the second moon landing. From the moment these astronauts set foot on the moon, they started chattering back and forth, saying, "Houston, there is something here. We feel a presence. We don't see anything, but our skin is crawling. Our hair is standing on end." When they were there, they took 300 pictures back and forth of each other. On landing back on Earth, those photographs were immediately confiscated and classified, and they have been ever since. The astronauts themselves, using the Freedom of Information Act, have gotten NASA and the government to release one photograph, and that's all we needed to see. Because it shows the astronauts here in a spacesuit, one of the astronauts, surrounded by a high-energy blue aura. And that's not a double exposure emulsion bloom or anything like that. These pictures were not classified for nothing. Now, you know, this really shouldn't surprise us. Christ himself and other great spiritual leaders all had glows around them, perpetual auras. All the pictures you see of angels and saints and many patriarchs, they also had glows around them. And you know, last year at this very retreat facility, a gentleman in the back of the room, when I put this slide up, jumped out of his seat and started waving his hand. He said, "Hey, wait a minute. Has it ever occurred to anyone that what we're looking at here is that astronaut's guardian angel?" And that's as good an explanation as any. But this is what spirit, life may look like on our nearest neighbor in space. And here is our daytime star, the sun. As we've already discussed, the sun is the source of all our light and warmth and heat and most of our energy. It is our life star. Well, to keep us alive, the sun is doing something absolutely incredible. And before I go on, let me say this to you. Unless you have a photographic mind, and I certainly don't, you're never going to remember all these incredible facts and figures we're throwing at you today, and it's not important. Simply let them come into your mind, seize the immensity and the majesty of what we're talking about, and then let it go. The bottom line here is, think about who created all of this, who keeps it all going, and realize that this is all a thought in the mind of our Creator. Well, every second that ticks by on your watch as you sit in this room today, the sun is taking 500 million tons of its material and converting it into pure energy. Right now, 500 million tons of the sun just vanished. Another 500 million tons. As far as we can tell, the sun has been doing this every second, day and night, for the last 4.5 billion years. And guess what? More than 90% of our star is still out there. That's what it means to be a star. And inside the sun's vast globe, you can put over 900,000 planet Earths. 900,000 of the world we live on and fight over will easily fit inside the sun, and yet the sun is classified as a midget. There are stars bigger than the entire solar system. Now, these are some of the magnetic storms that we're looking at here on the sun. These are all bigger than the Earth. They affect our weather and communications. And yes, you can see them through a pair of binoculars, but here, folks, I must warn you, if you don't know what you're doing and have the proper filters, even a small pair of binoculars will instantly blind both your eyes. My advice, don't mess with the sun. Go visit one of those daytime observatory or planetarium open houses, and you can watch the sun in complete safety. Well, an amazing, incredible discovery has recently been announced. Inside the sun, at its core, the temperature is 25 million degrees. Out here on the surface that we're looking at, the temperature is 6,000 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, by the way, not that it matters. Guess what they have just discovered inside of these sunspots? Water. Steam where none can possibly be. And the astronomers are really scratching their heads to see how it got there. These kind of discoveries are coming in daily and even hourly. You can't possibly keep up to them. Now, a few moments ago, we saw one of our astronauts' aura standing on the moon. Now we're looking at the sun's aura, what astronomers call the corona, the outer atmosphere of the sun. And this is a total eclipse where the moon perfectly blocks the sun so that we can see its atmosphere. Now, let me tell you about an amazing coincidence, one of the many we find in the field of astronomy. The sun is 400 times the diameter of the moon. It's 400 times bigger than the moon. It just so happens that the moon is exactly 400 times closer, and because of that incredible coincidence, the moon perfectly blocks the sun so that we can see this grandest of spectacles. And folks, it is the grandest of spectacles. The impact on human evolution, consciousness, and especially spirituality throughout history has been profound. Even today, in modern times, people witnessing an eclipse of the sun will drop to their knees and openly praise God. Well, we do not believe, I and many other astronomers, that that is a coincidence that the moon blocks the sun. We believe that God literally parked the moon in orbit where we find it now so that we could witness this incredible spectacle. Now listen, if God made these worlds, and surely He did, couldn't He put them wherever He wanted to? Now this is the planet closest to the sun, seen through the eyes of our Mariner spacecraft. Looks like the moon, but there's a lot more craters. This is Mercury. Here in the direct sunlight, the temperature is hot enough to melt lead. Down here in the shadows, it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, no atmosphere, no water, no moisture, and yet, did you hear the incredible discovery? NASA has announced that at both the north and south pole of Mercury, they have found ice caps, water ice caps where none could possibly be. In fact, even more recently, NASA has announced that at the south pole of our own moon, they have found a huge reservoir of water ice. The next planet out from the sun is Venus, here seen through a telescope, and you can see here that it does go through phases, very much like our moon. You can also tell that it's shrouded in clouds. And even our spacecraft, such as this view we see here from the Mariner, cannot penetrate those clouds, at least visually. Down on the surface, under this cloud cover, The temperature is nearly 900 degrees Fahrenheit, twice as hot as an oven. You know why? Because the atmosphere at the surface weighs 90 times what it does in this room. If you were to step out of a spacecraft onto the surface of Venus, you'd be instantly crushed and then roasted. Not a very pleasant place to go visit. And yet, may I remind you, and I think all of you in this room today have that blessed hope, that someday, and the way world events are going, it may be someday soon, we hope to have resurrected, Christ-like, transformed bodies. In those kind of bodies, we could go to Venus and Jupiter and Saturn and out to the stars. And you know, perhaps just maybe that's part of what heaven is all about, being able to roam God's universe. Moving further out now, we find the planet Mars, first outward from the Earth. Here is the white deposit that is known as the polar cap, that is water ice. The orange areas are deserts, and the dark areas are still a mystery. This is Mars, seen through the eyes of the Hubble telescope. Polar ice cap here. Now you can see that the deserts are covered with craters, and here are those mysterious dark markings. The reason they're a mystery is that in the summer, as we see here, they are blue-green. In the winter, they turn brown. Sounds like plants, but guess what? They're not vegetation. We're not sure what we're looking at. And these photographs are from the Viking spacecraft that visited the planet. Here we see the polar ice cap sticking up. We see a volcano venting moisture, perhaps even steam. There are craters, mountains, valleys, deserts, dust storms. You see, folks, even though Mars is just the opposite of Venus, because it's much further from the sun, very cold and a very thin atmosphere, it's the most Earth-like of all the other planets. And that's why all the attention on Mars. We have discovered that currently Mars is in an ice age, but at one time had running rivers, lakes, and possibly even oceans. This channel we see here, which by the way is the Grand Canyon of Mars, it stretches from New York to San Francisco. If you put it on the Earth and could see its full extent, that channel and others like it, we now know was cut by running water in the early history of the planet. And this is the volcano we saw a moment ago, 3 times as high as Mount Everest and as big as the state of New Mexico. And the next photograph is remarkable. You see, the soil of Mars is orange because Mars is oxidized or rusty, like a rusty nail. In fact, guess what happens if we heat the sands of Mars? We get oxygen and water vapor. We could live on that planet under a protective bubble. Anyway, one night, they shut the cameras down because the temperature dropped so low, as they do every night. Next morning, they cycled the cameras back up, and when they turned them on, the sands of Mars were covered with this white stuff. Guess what that white stuff is? It's a form of snow. And so, as the late astronomer Carl Sagan, whom I had the privilege of working with and knowing, told President George Bush many years ago at the White House, he said, "Mr. President, Mars has surprises for us, and here is one of them." This is the famous photograph of the face on Mars taken by one of the Viking orbiters. By the way, the little black dots you're looking at are not on Mars. They're gaps in the transmission of the picture. Now, there's no question this thing is there. It's a mile on each side, 1,300 feet high, and it is a face staring upward out into space. Now, most scientists, and following the lead of Carl Sagan himself, have believed that this is simply a trick of light and shadow on a natural rock formation. But others, including Sagan himself, just before he died, who changed his views on this, believe that this may be an artifact, something like the pyramids or the Sphinx over in Egypt, something they say was built by a long-dead Martian civilization. Incidentally, off to the left, not in the picture, a formation of pyramidal-shaped structures has also been photographed by the Viking orbiters. Now, pause here for a minute. I'm sure at least some of you are thinking to yourselves, if somebody built these things, if there are other beings out there, what does this do to our basic tenets of faith? And in the question and answer discussion period at the end of this program, we have a surprising answer for you. Well, as I'm sure you all know, we have a spacecraft in orbit about Mars currently. It is called the Mars Global Surveyor. and it is taking pictures reported to be anywhere from 10 to 50 times the resolution that we see here. Unfortunately, although it's been in orbit now for 6 months, NASA has announced that it will release no photographs of the face or the region of the pyramids for at least another several months. We'd like to know why, because those images are coming in as you are sitting here this afternoon. So stay tuned to Mars. We may have some surprising revelations in store for us. Now we're going to move outward to the giant planets, and boy, are they giants. Can everybody see the Earth here for scale? Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. This is Jupiter as seen through a small telescope, and these are the 4 satellites that Galileo discovered. You can see them even in a good pair of binoculars, doing their dance around the planet from hour to hour and night to night. There are 17 currently known moons. This is Jupiter as seen through an observatory-class telescope. You can put 1,200 Earths inside of this huge globe, and yet the entire planet spins in less than 10 hours, which is why all the clouds are drawn out into these colorful streaks and bands. Well, we're going to zoom in on this feature right here called the red spot. This is a photograph, and by the way, let me say this to you here. All of the pictures you're seeing in our program today are photographs. There are no drawings or paintings among them, and some of them coming up, I believe, are going to blow your mind. This is a photograph taken by the Voyager spacecraft that visited the 4 outer planets on the famed Grand Tour. Here are 2 of the moons, and here is the red spot. Look at all the psychedelic colors in Jupiter's atmosphere. Only a matter of 15 minutes later, these satellites had crossed in front of the planet. There's the red spot beneath this moon, and now at last we see this feature close up. This big oval that we see here, which is really a huge vortex in the atmosphere of Jupiter, stretches from here to here, tip to tip, 25,000 miles. Now, nobody ever expected to find life at our solar system any further out than the planet Mars. For one thing, it's simply too cold out there. Here in the clouds of Jupiter at the cloud tops, it's 200 below zero. And most of the gases we're looking at are poisonous to us. Well, an amazing discovery has been made. All 4 of those big giant outer planets are giving off tremendous amounts of internal heat from their cores, and just 100 miles down inside the atmosphere of Jupiter, it's room temperature. And guess what we've discovered there? Hydrogen, helium, methane, ammonia, formaldehyde, oxygen, water vapor, lightning, all the essential building blocks for life. And 2 years ago, Cornell University announced that the red spot on Jupiter contains organic molecules, the precursors to life. Now, these are the 4 moons of Jupiter that Galileo discovered, and we have a space probe out there now called the Galileo probe. It'll be there for several years, appropriately named after him since he found these satellites. This is a montage of the 4 bright moons. And I want to call your attention to this moon right here. It is called Europa. Simply think of the continent of Europe if you want to remember its name, and I urge you to do so. Well, NASA has now gone public with something that we have known since the Voyagers went out there in 1979. But now with the Galileo probe, they've been able to confirm it. NASA has announced that Europa is covered with a liquid water ocean, which in turn is covered by a thick crust of ice. And just recently, they are close enough now to Europa that they're able to look down through the ice cover, and guess what they're seeing? Something is moving in the water under the ice. There's 2 possibilities. They're either icebergs or some form of aquatic life. Stay tuned to Jupiter. This is Saturn as seen through a small telescope, and no photograph or painting or drawing would ever do justice to seeing this thing with your own eyes. You just can't believe that is hanging out there with rings around it. This is an observatory-sized telescope view, and let me tell you something. If you could see this firsthand, which you can if you visit one of these observatory open house nights, you will go howling into the night. It is that incredibly beautiful. And here is Saturn through the eyes of the Voyager spacecraft. After they left Jupiter, they went out and photographed Saturn. Here's a few of the moons, one here, there's a couple here. And look at these majestic ice rings. They're composed of billions of chunks of rock and ice, each one orbiting Saturn. Now, these rings stretch from here to here, tip to tip, 170,000 miles. Guess how thin they are? Less than 100 feet thick. They're thinner than tissue paper compared to their width. So you talk about the delicate balance of the forces of nature, and you talk about heavenly glory. Look at the colors we see here in Saturn's atmosphere. And Saturn has currently known 22 moons. This is its largest, and like Jupiter's moon Europa, this is also an enigma. Its name is Titan, Titan, and I urge you to remember that name. There is a mission currently en route to Saturn, and it's going to take several years to get there, called the Cassini mission. The reason they're going back to Saturn is because of Titan. You see, folks, satellites of planets, like our own moon, and even small planets, as we saw a few moments ago, like Mercury, are too small. Their gravity is simply too weak to hold on to any kind of an atmosphere. But look at this picture. Clearly, Titan is surrounded by an atmosphere, and it's been measured to be twice as heavy as the air you're breathing in this room. That's impossible according to the laws of physics as we now understand them. But the reason they're going back to Saturn and Titan, wait till you hear this. When the Voyager probes flew by, they were able to analyze what this atmosphere is made of, and the scientists at Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California were in total shock and disbelief. And here I am quoting to you directly from NASA's own published report. The atmosphere of Titan is identical in composition to the photochemical smog over downtown Los Angeles. Wow! What creates smog? So stay tuned to Saturn and Titan. Here, by the way, is another one of Saturn's moons called Rhea. These green things look like plants, and the white areas look like suspended clouds. They can't be, because it's 300 below zero there. What are these mysterious orange markings here and here? You see all the mystery and wonder waiting for us out there. And folks, the next picture is truly a mind blower. Again, it is not a painting. As the Voyager probes left Saturn to go out to the next world we're going to visit, Uranus, it turned around and made this absolutely incredible family portrait. This is a photograph, and it only shows 6 of the 22 moons. Now, we have to be content to see wonders like this currently through the eyes of a robotic spacecraft. But again, let me remind you, someday in our resurrected, transformed bodies, we will be able to roam the universe at will, and I firmly believe our Creator wants us to see His handiwork, wonders like this firsthand. So take a good look at all of the pictures you're seeing in this program. Moving further out, we see the next planet, Uranus. 2 views through the Hubble telescope. This is what you'd see if you could look through that telescope. This is what you'd see if you had eyes sensitive to heat. And as I've already mentioned, all 4 giant planets have been found to be giving off tremendous amounts of heat from inside their core. Well, another amazing discovery has been announced. These cloud tops that you're looking at are at a temperature of 300 degrees below zero. This planet is nearly 2 billion miles from the sun. NASA has now announced that under those cloud tops is a liquid water ocean 6,000 miles deep. Who would have ever thought we could go swimming on these outer worlds? It's steaming hot here at the core, and up here at the cloud interface, it's a slushy ice mixture. And you know, folks, think about all the life forms that exist in our oceans here on Earth. They're only a matter of miles deep. Can you imagine the possibilities for aquatic life forms in a 6,000-mile deep ocean? Going further out, this is the next planet, Neptune, and for obvious reasons, it is nicknamed Big Blue. Lots of mysterious markings in its atmosphere, and it's now suspected, although this has not yet been officially announced, that under these clouds there is also an ocean. But folks, you see, what we have looked at so far is simply a drop in the cosmic bucket. It's when you jump to the realm of the stars that the majesty of God's universe becomes overwhelming. We're looking here at a piece of the sky as big as a dime held up at the end of your arm. Look at the countless pinpoints of light. Every one of those is a star, a sun, and we now know, both theoretically and observationally, that all of those stars have planets circling them. Now, I'm sure you've gone out on a crystal clear night and looked up and wondered to yourself, how many stars are there out there? Well, guess what? The Bible tells us. As a matter of fact, it tells us something else I'm going to share with you in a moment that literally blows my mind. First of all, do you remember the little container of sand I held up at the beginning of the program with 250,000 sand grains in it? What I'm about to tell you is statistically exact. It was done on a Cray computer. If you were to take a big bucket, and boy, it would have to be a big one, as you'll see, and go to your favorite beach and sit down in the sand, then wet your finger and start picking up individual grains of sand one at a time and count them. Guess what? If you were to count every single grain of sand on all the beaches and all the deserts on the entire planet Earth, when you got done counting, you'd be nowhere near the number of stars that we can now reach with our largest telescopes. And here we see more of these mass star clouds. If you're into Star Trek, there's a famous line, "It's a big universe, Mr. Scott," and indeed it is. Well, the Bible talks about stars as numerous as sand grains, but you know what blows my mind? In Isaiah and in the Psalms, it says that God calls each and every one of these stars by name. By name. He's got a name for every star shining in the night sky. And where did all these beautiful stars come from? Well, big surprise. Genesis in the Bible appears to be correct. The account that there was a flash of light and energy when God said, "Let there be light." The universe was born in an instant. And I'm sure it was simply a thought in the mind of our Creator that created everything we know. Well, what most folks do not realize is that although our universe was created in a spark, an instant of creation, creation on the local level is still occurring. Stars are being born and stars are dying as we sit here today, and this is where they come from. Remember, these are all actual photographs. In these huge clouds of hydrogen gas, new suns and their planets are incubating. What you're looking at here is a stellar nursery. And you and I and the Earth and everything we know was embedded in one of these gas clouds some 5 billion years ago when the solar system first formed. And they're incredibly beautiful. They're scattered all over the sky. Many of these you can see with a pair of binoculars. You will not see these vivid colors with a small instrument, but you can at least witness firsthand creation. They all have names, by the way, from their Earth-like resemblances. This is called the Rosette or the Rose Nebula. This is called the Lagoon Nebula from this dark rift of material which cuts the nebula in half here. And this one, if you have a good imagination, maybe you can see it, is called the Eagle Nebula. Right here are the outstretched wings of an eagle. Well, last year, the Hubble telescope was pointed right here at the tip of the eagle and took an incredible photograph that has now become world famous as the Fingers of God. At the top of these towering pillars of hydrogen gas, new suns and their planets are being born. And perhaps, if you move up to the monitor very closely, you may be able to see this feature right here. There's a dark sphere with a red ring around it. That is a proto-sun with its solar system forming. And you talk about heavenly glory. This is one of the 3 stars in Orion's famous belt, the winter constellation that I'm sure you've all seen at one time or another. You can easily see that star with your eye looking up on a clear night. Look at the majesty that is hidden there in the darkness of night. And we're going to zoom in on this feature right here. It is called the Horsehead Nebula for obvious reasons. There it is. Here we see a dark cloud hiding the more distant stars beyond it. Now, folks, I hope you can all see down here in the left-hand corner, there is a blob of light. That was not there a relatively few years ago. You see, it takes nature millions of years to incubate a star out of these gas cocoons. But guess how short a time it takes to turn the star on and it begins shining? 3 minutes. In 3 minutes, the star goes thermonuclear and flashes into view. That's one of the privileges of being an astronomer, to sit there and watch new stars being born right in front of your eyes. And thanks to the Hubble telescope, we're going to go down inside of that blob of light. Here we see the spinning protostar. You can tell it's spinning, and it is spinning very rapidly. And we're going to go all the way down into the core of this nebula, and there at last we see the baby star right there surrounded by rings. It may look little to you, but that little disk there is 100 million miles across at this stage. And wait till you hear what these rings are. Folks, you've all seen a figure skater out on the ice. And when they start to do one of their spectacular spins, they pull their arms in closer and closer to their bodies. What happens? They spin faster and faster. The same thing happens with newborn stars. As they condense out of these gas clouds, they spin faster and faster, and if something doesn't slow them down, they will shred themselves to pieces. How does the figure skater stop their spin? They throw their arms out. How does the star do it? It sheds these rings of material. They're like the stellar brake shoes that slow down the spinning newborn star. Guess what happens to those rings? They become the planets and the satellites of that star. What I'm saying to you, as I'm sure many of you realize, is that for a star to be shining out there in the night sky, it has to have planets. It's part of the natural birth process of a star. So think of all those stars and realize they all have worlds circling them. And you know, the stars aren't typically born one at a time. They're born in doublets and triplets and quadruplets. If you were living on a planet here, you'd have a blue sun and an orange sun shining in your sky instead of our familiar yellow sun. You could have a ruby red, an emerald green, a lavender, and a turquoise sun all shining simultaneously in your daytime sky. And they form into even larger aggregations, these incredibly beautiful stellar jewel boxes, clusters of hundreds, even thousands of stars, all moving through space together as a family. And they even form larger aggregations, these enormous stellar beehives with up to 1 million suns. Now, folks, at this point, I think it's obvious, yes, the universe is powerful and majestic and magnificent, but now comes the important part. It is also highly ordered, highly structured. There is a design behind it, and there is a designer. And let me prove that to you. Look at the stars in the center of this cluster. These are suns, millions of miles in diameter. At the center, they're moving at speeds of thousands of miles per second, and they seem piled on top of each other like sand grains. And don't you wonder, do they ever collide with each other? Well, the example I'm about to give you now is, like the sand grain example, statistically exact. Again, it was done on a Cray computer. Let's say in this lecture hall, I happen to catch a fly that is flying around right now, a retreat fly. And let's say halfway around the world, perhaps in Sydney, Australia, there's a similar retreat going on with another stargazer speaking, and let's say he has caught a fly there also. When this program is over, we're going to take both those flies and release them simultaneously. Guess what? The chance that the fly you release here in your city, flying all around the world, is ever going to bump into the fly that your fellow retreatant in Sydney, Australia released, flying all around the world, is the chance that any two stars will ever hit each other. In other words, God not only gave the stars names, made them and gave them names, He gave them all their own pathways through the heavens. That is no coincidence that these stars do not collide. Incidentally, relatively recently in the news, although it's not news to astronomers, we've known about this for over 50 years, but some spectacular new images have been taken through the Hubble and other telescopes. You heard news of colliding galaxies. Well, yes, galaxies collide, and we're going to see a galaxy in just a few moments. These structures are so huge, they can't but help collide with each other. But the stars inside the galaxy never touch each other. They pass by each other like phantoms in the night. It's the gas clouds, some of which we saw earlier. Those gas clouds collide, and that starts star formation. New stars are born as a result of collisions of galaxies. But stars themselves, again, never collide. And you know, stars do not live forever. They have incredibly long lifetimes measured in the billions of years. But just as people die, stars die, and there is a beautiful message for all of us here. Some stars, the huge, rare heavyweights, do this. They literally blow themselves to smithereens. This is what astronomers call a supernova explosion. And by the way, this happens to be the best guess science has on what the Christmas star, the Star of Bethlehem, might have been. And when these stars explode, they shed their remains, spreading it out into space, scattering it among the stars. And I'll tell you in a moment what happens to that debris. But most stars, like our own sun, they will not go out with a bang when they die. They go out with a whimper. Here is the dying star right there in the center. And what they do is silently and gracefully shed their outer layers, returning the material they're made out of back out into space where it came from. These are all actual photographs of dying stars. This next picture is not a painting. It was taken by the Hubble just as this star puffed out another blast of gas. And the next picture, also from the Hubble, has now become world famous as the Eye of God. This is a dying star shedding its outer layers. And I don't know about you folks, but I think these stars are as beautiful in their death throes as when they're being born. As one astronomer put it, these gas clouds are reefs that nature has placed around its dying sun. And here is another magnificent dying star. Here's the dying star in the center. Here's the material being ejected from that sun. I have two incredible things to share with you. First of all, guess what happens to this material? It expands out into space, mixes with other gas and dust, and then the whole process starts all over again. From the ashes of the old stars, the new are born. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why we have a fascination with the stars? Why we bother to look up at the sky on a clear night? Why some of us, like our astronauts, want to go out there? Why we place our God out there? The famous philosopher Erich Hoffer put it better than anybody ever has. He said, we look at the stars because it's a homing impulse. We're drawn to where we came from. You know what he meant by that? We now know, beyond any doubt, that all of the materials in your bodies, all the atoms and molecules, all of the material on the planet Earth, everything we know of here has been inside of at least 3 dying stars in the early history of the universe. You and I, my friends, are star children. We are made of star stuff. Even more incredible, wait till you hear what happens to the dying star. Just as with human beings, the star never dies, depending on how much mass it had, how much material when it started to die. It will go through the most incredible metamorphosis ever discovered by science. It will first collapse into what is called a white dwarf. That's an entire star, 1,000,000 miles or more in size, collapsed down to the size of our moon. And then it will go through another internal adjustment and collapse into what is called a neutron star. That's an entire sun, shrunk down to the size of a small city, and it is basically an enormous atom. And then it will collapse into the most bizarre object science has ever encountered. Einstein predicted them. Science fiction writers have been dreaming and writing about them for years now. And would you believe the Holy Bible, written more than 20 centuries ago, talks about them? Open the Bible to the Jude, which is a very short part of the Bible, just before Revelation. And look at verse 13. There's only one chapter in Jude. Read verse 13, and there you will hear about wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever, a perfect description written 2,000 years ago of a black hole. This is the first released photograph of a black hole. The hole itself is this tiniest of dots right there. You may not be able to see it. In fact, you really can't see a black hole. What we're looking at here is material matter being sucked down the cosmic drain pipe on its way to another place and time. My friends, a black hole is an entire star shrunk down to the size of this retreat facility. And if you took a cubic inch of a black hole and put it on your bathroom scale, guess what would happen to it? It would instantly disappear in front of your eyes. It would go down through the center of the earth and out the other side. You know why? Because a cubic inch of a black hole weighs in at 1 billion tons. That's 1,000 million tons. And you know, in view of world events, I can't help but sharing this calculation with you. It's been calculated that if you took all 7 billion human beings, that's the current figure, by the way, there are 7 billion of us riding on this planet Earth, and compress this down to the density of a black hole, which we now know exists, the entire human race would fit inside the space of one single raindrop. In view of what we're doing to the world and to each other, can you picture our Creator going, I've got you in the palm of my hand, the entire human race? Let me assure you, such power exists. And finally, out beyond all that we have seen, beyond the curtain of stars that we see here at the edge of our galaxies, if you go out far enough, you will come to the ultimate units in the universe, the other galaxies themselves. This is the famed Andromeda galaxy, one of the largest and brightest and closest to us. The light that made this photograph left there 20,000 centuries ago. It is now just reaching us. And would you believe, on a clear night in the fall, if you look nearly overhead, the human eye can see this object with no optical aid at all. We can actually see nature's largest units. Inside of this blur of light are over 500 billion stars, 500 billion suns floating in the ocean of night, and guess what we've now discovered? There are more galaxies than there are stars inside of a galaxy. Here's another galaxy, here's another galaxy. In the bowl of the Big Dipper alone, which is a relatively small piece of the sky, the Palomar Observatory in California has photographed over 1 million galaxies. These are only a few of them. Each of these blurs of light is a star city floating in the ocean of night. And finally, our last slide. As a Christmas gift, a couple years ago to the human race, the Hubble telescope took and released an incredible photograph. Most folks apparently missed this. They were looking for the big guy in the red suit. So now you're going to see it. This is a photograph taken with the largest telescope in the world. They pointed the Hubble right here at a piece of sky as big as 1 grain of sand held out at the end of your arm. And they did a 100-hour time exposure. Now, folks, get the picture. Here's the Hubble orbiting the Earth at 18,000 miles an hour, 5 miles a second. They kept it pointed at that sand-grained piece of sky for 100 hours. On Christmas Eve, as a gift to the human race, the Hubble telescope released this picture, where the largest telescope in the world shows absolutely nothing. The Hubble shows this. More and more galaxies, they go on and on forever. Now, at this point in the program, and we're basically done, you may be thinking to yourself, my gosh, does it matter whether I get up tomorrow? You know, you feel lost in this immensity. And let me say to you, if you do not have faith in God, in a creator, then it is a big, scary, frightening universe. We're just a bunch of microbes floating in infinity. But if you recognize that there not only is a God, a creator that made this vast universe, but also cared enough to make each and every one of us, then it does matter whether you get up tomorrow, and let me prove it to you. First of all, these objects that we're looking at, these giant galaxies out at the edge of the observable universe, in them is the very same calcium that's in your fingernails, your teeth, and your bones. The same blood that is flowing through your bloodstream right now. The same oxygen you're breathing in this room is out there at the edge of the observable universe. God used the same building blocks throughout his creation to make his universe. Even more incredible, wait till you hear this one. These galaxies are the largest known basic units in nature. As you see, they form families, but we're talking basic structures. The smallest basic structure is the atom. And again, there's lots of stuff inside the atom. We're talking basic units. Guess where you and I, humanity, falls in this incredible cosmic scheme of things? We are exactly, to 30-some decimal points, halfway in size from the atom to the galaxy. We're as much bigger than an atom as a galaxy is bigger than us. My friends, that is not a coincidence. I am convinced that God placed us midway in his creation so we could see and study and contemplate and admire his handiwork in the ultra-small and the ultra-large. And finally, as our famous philosopher pointed out long ago, the mind that encompasses this universe is more amazing than the universe that encompasses the mind. Inside our tiny rings, we can contemplate something of this majesty. I think that proves beyond any doubt that our minds are patterned after the mind of our Creator. The bottom line here, folks, is look up at the stars on a clear night. Think about who created all of this majesty and who keeps it all going, and realize it's the very same personal God that all of us here are worshiping. Thank you very much. Welcome to our question and answer and discussion session. We're going to explore here some of the most frequently asked questions at programs like this.
What impact will the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe, evidence that we have been visited in the past, or are being contacted in one way or another right now, have upon our basic beliefs about God?
That's an excellent and a very profound question, and I'm sure many of you in this audience have thought about this yourselves. If we find out that somebody did build that face and those pyramidal structures on Mars, if tomorrow a radio message comes in from the stars and somebody says, "Hello, we're out here," what does that do to our basic tenets of faith? Well, folks, I don't know about you, but my God is a big God. He's a God of this entire universe, not just this one small, beautiful planet that we live on. And just think about this for a moment. If we do encounter other civilizations, we do have contact with them, and we find out that not only do they recognize a power as such behind the universe, a creative power, but also a personal God, and the very same personal God that we all worship within us. What an incredible confirmation of our faith. And you know, the Bible, among other religious texts, is filled with inferences about this. Here I'm only going to explore one verse that I'm sure you have all heard before. In John 10, Christ made the statement that other sheep have I, which are not of this fold. Now that's normally taken to mean people outside of the faith. But in a larger context, and I've discussed this with theologians, Jesuit priests, others that have given a lot of thought to this, fellow astronomers, in a larger context, almost certainly Christ was referring to those other worlds that he had created and populated. So we openly embrace the possibility that we're living in a biocosmos, a cosmos teeming with life, with beings who recognize the same God we do.
Why are astronomers often called time travelers?
That's a great question. When you look out into space, the further out into space you look, the further back into time you go. For example, in the bright winter constellation, and I'm sure at one time or another you've all seen Orion, in his upper left shoulder is a brilliant reddish-orange star called Betelgeuse. The light that we are seeing from that star tonight left there 500 years ago when Columbus discovered America. Down below Orion's three belt stars that we talked about in the slides is a nebula, the Orion Nebula, one of those many magnificent gas clouds, those stellar nurseries that we saw just a little bit ago. And the Orion Nebula is almost 2,000 light years from us. Now, if you were living on a planet inside that nebula and you had a super duper telescope and could zoom in on the Earth, guess what you could see? You could see the image of Christ walking the shores of the Sea of Galilee, because that image is just now reaching there. If you go out 60 million years, you will see the dinosaurs being wiped out. If you go out 4.5 billion years, you'll see the birth of our Earth. And I really believe that our Creator, either himself or through other beings, advanced beings, is going to show us or play back for us our entire recorded history of this planet. Our entire history is out there in space. So astronomers indeed are time travelers.
What is meant by the photon connection?
This is an amazing fact, something that a child could probably immediately, intuitively grasp, but we sophisticated adults need to think about it. And the photon connection, which is a name I've coined and published, and it's kind of caught on in the astronomical community, is the simple but profound fact that when you look out at the stars at night, and this can just be with your eye or a pair of binoculars, but it gets more incredible the further out you look using a telescope. When you look at a star, you are getting a piece of that star inside of your eye. You see, we see objects in the universe by photons of light. Photons have a very strange dualistic nature. They're both a wave, or they're also a particle. You might look at it as a particle traveling in a wave. And so when the light that you see from a star or a nebula or perhaps a galaxy millions of light years out enters your eye, that was something that was inside that object, has crossed the entire universe and ended its journey on the retina of your eye. So that you are then in direct physical linkage. You have a piece of something that was out there inside of you. And no wonder we have all these profound revelations and upliftment of spirit by looking and communing with the stars.
Are there shortcuts through time and space?
Well, there are shortcuts through time and space, and we've already discussed one of them. Black holes, as we saw near the end of our program earlier, are considered as subways in the sky. They're connecting different parts of the universe at different times. But there are other ways of short-circuiting space other than trying to travel physically all the way out there. For example, the Andromeda Galaxy, as we saw, is over 2 million light years away. Even traveling at the speed of light, it would take 20,000 centuries to go from here to there. And, you know, we are raised on what we call linear thinking. Living on this planet as we do, we are told that the shortest distance between 2 points is to go in a straight line from point A to point B. And even though we actually live on a sphere, the Earth is so big compared to our size that it looks like we're traveling in a straight line, but we're actually traveling in a curve when you go over long distances, such as in an airplane flight. Well, I have a diagram here I would like to share with you. This shows 2 ovals. The one at the bottom of the diagram represents our Milky Way galaxy where we live. The oval here at the top represents one of our nearest and brightest neighbors, the famed Andromeda Galaxy that we showed you on one of our last slides. Now, the distance separating them, as shown by the arrow, is this incredible number here, 2 million times 6 trillion miles. Again, our linear thinking minds have been taught that if we want to go from the Milky Way to the Andromeda Galaxy, we have to travel all those incredible miles. But if Einstein was right, and he's been right about everything he predicted, if space is curved, we need only do this. We need only go the thickness of this piece of paper, and we can be there instantly. As the great novel Jonathan Livingston Seagull puts it, perfect speed, my son, is being there at the speed of thought. So this is one of the ways that we may be able to go throughout the universe by using curved space-time.
What is the reconciliation between science and religion that we're hearing more and more about today?
An excellent question, and a very appropriate one to end our program with. I'm sure you're all aware that for centuries, science and religion have gone their separate ways. The clergy look at scientists as all atheists. The scientists look at the clergy as all fanatics. As Einstein himself said, science without religion is lame, but religion without science is blind. Well, 7 years ago, something incredible happened. Science and religion put on the brakes, turned around, and they are now rapidly approaching, and it is predicted that by the end of this decade, the end of this century, they will merge into a single discipline as they once were long ago. And there's signs of this that I could give you examples of. The late astronomer Carl Sagan, in his novel Contact, called for a reconciliation between science and religion on the common ground of the magnificence of this universe we live in. I think most of you are aware of the fact that the Pope has pardoned Galileo. But what you may not be aware of, that just a year ago in Mount Graham, Arizona, one of the world's largest, most sophisticated optical observatories opened. Guess whose observatory it is? It's the Vatican's observatory. It's staffed by Jesuit astronomers. And guess what their #1 charter from the Pope himself is? This has been published. They are to find and detect other worlds out there, and if they're there, other civilizations. Boy, times have changed. We've come a long way over the last couple thousand years. Well, there's a reason why this is happening. First of all, talk to a nuclear physicist. Here at this very retreat facility, there have been physicists from MIT and Princeton and other great think tanks and universities. Talk to a physicist. If they're right, if the latest theories of atomic structure are right, guess what's inside of the atom that makes all of us up? Nothing. There's nothing there. It's a bunch of wiggles and vibrations. And you know, I can see how Christ and others were reported to have walked right through what appear to be solid walls, to have walked on water. He simply attuned the vibratory rate of his atoms and molecules and went right through what is actually empty space. So, after all these years of research and theories and atomic accelerators and so on, we finally come to find out there's really nothing inside the atom. And a curtain appears to be drawn over the micro small. In the ultra large, out in the universe, the very same thing is about to happen. By the end of this decade, which is not that far off, something incredible is going to happen in Hawaii, and you need to be aware of this. The world's two largest optical telescopes are nearing completion. They're called the Keck telescopes after the oil baroness, Mrs. Keck, who paid for them. Keck 1 is already completed. Keck 2 is under construction and will soon be completed. By the way, these instruments have mirrors in them 400 inches in diameter. That's twice as big as the Palomar telescope in California. What they are going to do, when the second Keck telescope is completed, they are going to link them into the world's biggest binocular. On the night that happens, as the project scientist has already told the news media, on the night that happens, he said, we're going to look directly into the face of God. You know why he said that? Because those two new telescopes linked together will enable us to travel far enough out into space, to look far enough back in time to see the incredible event of creation mentioned in Genesis, what astronomers call the Big Bang. And we will be able to go no further. So out there, a curtain is also being drawn. This seems to be a sign, in my opinion and that of others, that we are approaching the close of an age. I'd like to end both our lecture program and this question and answer session with a beautiful quote from the famous astronomer, Dr. Robert Jastrow. Dr. Jastrow is the author of a book that's been around for a number of years called God and the Astronomers. And in that book, he talks about the very same things we just have, how science and religion are approaching each other and will soon embrace. The very last paragraph in that book, this is what Dr. Jastrow has to say, and he here is referring to the search to go beyond the Big Bang to see what happened before it all started. Now we would like to pursue that inquiry further back in time, but the barrier to progress seems insurmountable. It's not a matter of another year, another decade of work, another measurement, or even another theory. It now seems as though science will never be able to raise the curtain on the ultimate mystery of creation. For the scientist who has lived in his faith in the power of reason, this story is ending like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peaks. And as he pulls himself over the final rocks, he's greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. Thank you very much. In this expanded version of our program, we now present more than 24 awesome new images taken with the Hubble Space Telescope, which we see here in its orbital perch some 375 miles above the Earth. Certainly not the largest telescope at our disposal, but the one above the atmosphere continues to take awesome new images of our incredible universe. Here we see the beautiful planet Venus, the bright morning star as it's referred to in the Bible, photographed by the Hubble. And photographing objects near the sun is very risky for the Hubble. Any heating would cause disastrous effects, but this is one of the rare photographs showing some of the dusky markings on the crescent planet. Here is the planet Mars showing its northern polar ice cap, and it is pure water ice. The southern cap in this view has melted, but it is composed of water ice and carbon dioxide or dry ice. We see the expansive orange deserts and the mysterious markings, the blue-green markings, which are not vegetation, even though they do go through a seasonal cycle. This magnificent image of Saturn looks to me as if it dropped right out of heaven itself, photographed by the Hubble at wavelengths that enable us to penetrate the cloud tops and see the beautiful markings underneath. Here we're looking at the planet Uranus, pulled on, as photographed by the Hubble, showing its multitude of rings and its retinue of some 16 satellites. This is the strange world tilted over 98 degrees to our point of view. Although it's not much to look at, this is the finest image ever taken of the outermost planet Pluto and its moon Chiron. Pluto is only the size of our moon, and its moon is half the size of Pluto. A very strange pair of worlds indeed. The following images will show, leaving the solar system now, areas of star birth. And here is one of the most beautiful inside the Lagoon Nebula. These are called cosmic twisters, and although we don't know exactly what is happening, it is directly related to the birth of other suns. Here, deep within the heart of the Omega Nebula, new stars are being born, displaying all the hues of the rainbow, the heavenly hues of star birth. Here we are seeing an incredible image of what appear to be umbilical cords going from the baby stars to the parent nebulosity. The parallels between human birth and stellar birth are incredible. Here on the outskirts of a newborn baby star appear to be a flock of angels. Most of the professional astronomers wouldn't buy this, but recall what we said earlier in the program about being able to roam God's magnificent universe in our new resurrected, glorified bodies. And talking about angels, can you believe this image? It looks for all the world like angel wings. Angels watching over the birth of the infant stars in their nurseries. Perhaps you'll recall the famous Fingers of God image shown earlier in the program. Well, here's the Hubble sequel to it. This, taken with its new camera, is called the Throne of God. And surely this does look like some heavenly vista. Perhaps earlier in the program you'll recall the image taken of the constellation Orion's famed three belt stars, beneath one of which is the Horsehead Nebula. Here in this updated close-up image, the Hubble's been able to actually zoom in on the newborn stars hiding within the nebula itself. Within the Horsehead and Orion Nebula complex, the Hubble telescope has just released this incredible view of stars actually starting to shine and their planetary systems forming. On the right-hand edge of the slide is a dark sphere, and if you look closely, inside is a red speck. That is a star that has yet to begin shining. Going now from stars that are forming to ones that have already formed, we see one of those colossal stellar beehives containing upwards of 1 million suns. The light that made this cluster, one of the closest to us, left there 24,000 years ago when the cavemen were still hunting mastodon. In the stunning close-up of a section of the previous image, we see stars piled upon each other like sand grains. And you may recall from earlier in the program the incredible fact that there are more stars within reach of our largest telescopes than all the grains of sand on the entire planet Earth. Turning our attention now from stars being born to stars in the process of dying, and as we've learned earlier in the program, stars never really die, we see here an aged star in the center of a ring of material that's being ejected silently and majestically out into the depths of space. In this magnificent image, we see another example of a star shedding its complex outer layers. Nicknamed appropriately the Spirograph Nebula, looking closely you can see an infinity of small eddies inside the nebula itself. This beautiful object is called the Eight-Burst Nebula, from the multiple shells extending outward. Deep within the center of the nebula, you'll notice a double star. As we learned earlier in the program, most stars are born in binary systems, and in this case, it's the fainter star that has long ago shed its outer layers. This beautiful object is called the Snail Nebula, although I prefer to look at it as some kind of celestial flower, a heavenly rose. And indeed, as Longfellow pointed out long ago, the stars are the flowers in the meadows of heaven. This strange-looking object has been called the Ant Nebula, from the two spheres of gas expanding in opposite directions outward from the central star. The Hubble continues to show us vistas of unearthly beauty. Everywhere it is pointed, we see magnificence. And oh, look at this, a celestial butterfly. How appropriate that we have a butterfly in the heavens. For as you know, butterflies are a symbol for transformation and rebirth. God's given us a clear message throughout his creation that like the stars, we are eternal. The material you see expanding outward will someday recycle and make a brand new star. Here in this stunning composite image of some of the stars we have already looked at, stars supposedly in the process of dying. I don't know about you, but this does not look like death to me. It looks like something glorious and wonderful, and indeed it is. From the ashes of these stars, the new stars will be born. And leaving our magnificent Milky Way galaxy, we venture outward to the realm of the other galaxies themselves. Here we see a twin to our own galaxy, a system so vast that light requires 100,000 years to cross it. Inside of that spiral are more than 500 billion stars, 500 billion suns. As we've seen earlier in the program, galaxies congregate into groups, sometimes a few dozen, as we see here, all the way up to magnificent superclusters containing 10,000 galaxies, 10,000 individual star cities floating in the ocean of night. The galaxies in these clusters are sometimes so close that they actually collide and pass through each other like phantoms in the night. The gas in the galaxy ignites and forms new stars, but the stars themselves pass by each other totally unaffected. And here we see the result of these galactic mergers. Two galaxies passing through each other, the hydrogen gas in each igniting, colliding, condensing, forming vast regions of new stars. This is what astronomers call a starburst galaxy, and they are visible all the way across the universe. In our final image, we are looking at a piece of the nighttime sky, as big as a sand grain held at the end of your arm. Using Hubble's new advanced camera, they imaged this section of the heavens for over 100 hours. The first astronomer at the Hubble Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore to see the image coming in on the monitor cried out loud, "Oh my God, it's filled with galaxies." And looking carefully, there are over 10,000 individual galaxies, each containing 500 billion stars in that speck of sky. As vast as our universe is, we now suspect that it is only one of a multitude of such bubble universes. As Sir Arthur Clarke has so elegantly expressed it, they are like the foam on the seashore, the bubbles in the foam that appear and disappear. In view of all the beauty we have seen in this segment, I would like to end with a quote from Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Beethoven said, "Surely, above the starry firmament, a loving Father must dwell." Thank you.